Hey guys, my name's Soren Roy. I'm a musician, I'm a spiritual philosopher, and I'm somebody who's been living with tinnitus for over 10 years. And I like to apply my studies and my learnings in philosophy and spirituality to the realm of tinnitus because that's what gave me freedom. That's what gave me freedom from tinnitus compared to the maybe more medical paradigm that I think we're all thrown into as we start experiencing tinnitus and looking into what our options are. So, what I kind of like to do is to often just deconstruct our ways of thinking and our ways of being that have us be stuck in our tinnitus and our experience of tinnitus. Because I see a lot of people, I know myself, I was very stuck in it for a very long time, and I did not see any way out given the options offered to me. And so today I want to take a look at logic, which is something, I don't know, we all have an experience of logic. We all think we use it or something like that, and we do. That's kind of what I want to say, is that we do all use logic. But is logic truth? I guess is the ultimate question of today. So, I think when something like logic goes unexamined, whereas we think we're using it, I'm going to say it's more so using us. And say, well, what is our logic using us for? I know my logic had me inside of a story that my life was ruined, my ability to be a musician was ruined, and that I had caused my suffering because of my desire to be a musician, to be an artist, to express myself. And I'm going to say that logic didn't work, right? In the sense that it didn't ever have a way out of that suffering. And I was trying to get out of my suffering over my tinnitus, trying to kind of get free from that suffering. But inside of that logic that I was being used by, there was no way out. So first today, I just want to take a look at Aristotle, right? A very famous name in philosophy. And I want to start by saying I did not study philosophy in college. I went to college, but I'm not an academic in that sense. But I want to take a look at Aristotle because he sort of came up with these models of logic that we're still living inside of, that we're still being used by. So I pulled up just some writing on him. Starts off, Aristotle's logic, especially his theory of syllogism, has had an unparalleled influence on the history of Western thought. Right? So just right there, we can kind of get that this guy was important. Stuff that this guy said, his theories on logic, are still around. And like I said, when they're around and to the extent that they are, we're using them unknowingly. And there's no problem with that. They've gotten us very far. Well, there's no problem until they stop working and we're still using them, right? Like a hammer works to an extent, but once you gotta, saw some wood, you're not going to still use the hammer, right? So if our goal is to get out of our suffering over tinnitus, or really anything in life, I'm going to say that we have to switch tools out of logic. So we're going to look at some examples of what this Aristotelian, this syllogistic logic is. First example, all cars have wheels. I drive a car. Therefore, my car has wheels. Right? Now, I am fine with that. I'm totally fine with that. No problems with it. And so it goes on. Major premise, all cars have wheels. Minor premise, I drive a car. Conclusion, my car has wheels. Now we'll go on to another one. All insects frighten me. That is an insect. Therefore, I am frightened. Major premise, all insects frighten me. Minor premise, that is an insect. Conclusion, I am frightened. So, yeah, I think this is the logic that we all go into our experience of tinnitus with. But I want to look at this thing called conclusion, because I want to bring up how so often our conclusions come before any sort of premise, or any premise that comes into our life I want to look at how it's actually already coming into a conclusion. So when I look at my life, I see that I had always had a conclusion that I wasn't going to get what I want. That I always had a conclusion that something was going to come into my life that was going to take away my ability to be a musician, my freedom to be a musician. It was going to ruin my potential, right? That my potential was going to be ruined. I think that was a conclusion that I'd always kind of been living inside of, and because of that, it had me always maneuvering my life away from certain things. For me, it was like any sort of career or any sort of serious relationship, because I had a conclusion that those things were going to take away my potential to be fully expressed in my music and in my art and in my identity, right? And I like to look back at how we're kind of taught to make arguments even, right? Because we go into message boards, we go into websites, we go into doctor's offices, and I want to say, although we think we're going in being logical, looking for logic, I know that myself, it didn't matter how many stories I heard about musicians being successful with tinnitus, living happy lives with tinnitus. I had a conclusion, and so I only sought out the stories, or I only believed in the stories that musicians were speaking of how it had ruined their lives, right? So I'm going to say, well, I thought I was being logical, saying this musician has tinnitus, their life was ruined, or their music career was ruined, therefore mine is going to be ruined. I wasn't being as logical as I even thought, right? The conclusion was always coming first. And so again, back to looking at how we make arguments in colleges, we present a conclusion, right? We present an idea, an argument that we're going to prove to the professor, and then we go and do our research and we prove that. And I think we can say, oh, well, that's college, that's just a way of doing things, but we want to look at how we really live our lives. Are we really out there being logical? We think our minds are very logical, right? We think we're pulling in experiences and pulling up memories that are applicable. But as a spiritual philosopher, I'm really more interested in what is it, what category, what's the story, what's the proof that all of our memories, all of our experiences, all the things that exist to us, exist means to stand out. So what is all the things that stand out to us? What is the story that they're concluding to? And for me, I see that a lot of my life was trying to conclude, while it seemed like I was taking all this action, doing all these things, committing my life to being a musician, I can see that behind all of that, what was really running the show was a conclusion that I wasn't going to get what I want, that I wasn't going to have the successful music career that I wanted, and that my life was going to kind of be ruined by something, whether it was a job dominating me or a relationship dominating me. And so then when the tinnitus came into my life, it just fit into this logic. The logic was already there, and it was just proving a conclusion that I was sort of just waiting to be proved. And it took a real honest look at these ways of thinking in myself to start to get out of that, and to start to get like, man, I've been waiting for something to come and ruin my life. And it's still, like, it sucks to say, but I lived my life in that way. I really lived my life in that way, just kind of in the back of my mind, always knowing something was going to come and take away my freedom in that sense. And for me, it was tinnitus. And then when it happened, I suffered in it for so long, always trying to get out of it. But as long as I was get out of my suffering, but as long as I was stuck in my logic, there was no way out. There was no way out until I started to deconstruct my logic and deconstruct the beliefs behind it. And I think tinnitus offers us a really great entry point for doing that, right? Because, if I hadn't had tinnitus, if I hadn't had that such a big breakdown like tinnitus, that I couldn't sit in the pain of it, I couldn't sit in the despair of it. I had to do something, and I tried to do everything, outside of me, but until I started to look at these internal processes. But if I hadn't had the incentive of tinnitus to do that, I don't know. I probably would have just gone on with my life in this safe little box. You know, tinnitus was the thing that had me say, "Wow, I have to really start letting go of my attachments to these beliefs about myself and how the world works and how I work and how my life works and what's going to work for it and what doesn't." And you know, I know these things are scary at times, but the freedom that comes with it, I mean, you know, I was always stuck in predicting, right, concluding, using logic to figure out what my life was going to be like, and it always turned out to be, you know, a tragedy. Then I would use logic to figure out how to avoid that tragedy, but by doing that, you know, I thought I had to give up music. So then I was always confronted with this thing about giving up music, which was really just pulling that future I'd created, that miserable future, you know, of giving up the thing that I loved, and I was pulling it towards me so that I thought I could avoid that suffering. But in doing so, I was just bringing it closer to me. So yeah, I'm just, you know, kind of requesting that we all in this community of people with tinnitus look at our logic and look at what is the conclusion about our lives that tinnitus fits into. And maybe we have to throw away our logic. And maybe we have to stop being so logical, in the sense of we have to stop thinking we know what's going to happen in our lives and that we know what tinnitus is going to do to our lives. So with all that being said, with all of our logic being looked at and seeing how it only really works to keep us stuck inside of our suffering, it's not my goal to redirect our logic. It's my stance that that's what logic does. When we reduce ourselves to these logical beings, we get stuck. We hit walls and we stay stuck for as long as we're kind of not willing to recognize that maybe we're just not really logical beings. Maybe there's something else going on. For me, it was a look into my spirit, into what it is that created all these stories about myself, about how my life was going to turn out, about what was possible for me, and speaking about them. You know, I have to speak about these things to you guys just as much as I'm going to say you have to be speaking about them to other people. In doing so, we start to kind of expose the illogical nature of ourselves and maybe start looking at what else there really is to us.